Welcome to our ASD Presents this evening. So Erin Rado is a mindfulness artist. Erin Rado began her art collection in 2009 with a modern take on Celtic art. Her idea was to create endless looping patterns that contained unpredictable twists, bends, and curves. While the goal was to give classic Celtic art a modern aesthetic, what Erin inadvertently created Celtic tracing mandalas that had the ability to focus and calm the mind. Taking the name Raven's Daughter, she founded the Celtic Art Store. Erin traveled to Renaissance fairs, Celtic festivals, and art shows across the country. At each show, she expanded her collection and observed how her art affected human cognition. At these shows, she began to attract interest from behavioral wellness professionals who encouraged Erin to begin showing at conferences. Erin's first conference was EMDRIA in 2013. EMDR is an established trauma therapy, and Erin's work was a huge draw for conference attendees. Since then, Erin has shown at therapy, counseling, and wellness conferences, each with the same result. In 2016, Erin branded her Celtic collection as Mandolins, mindful tracing art for stress, anxiety, and attention management. However, now that her Celtic collection was complete, Erin began to turn her attention to labyrinths. Erin began her labyrinth art collection in 2017 by researching, come back to me, and studying ancient and modern labyrinth designs. She incorporated all well-known labyrinths into her collection, but she also designed a few original labyrinths. When completed, Erin's labyrinth collection contained 21 images ranging from very simple to very complex. Erin's Celtic mandolin and finger labyrinth mindful tracing art collections are available on her website, celticartstore.net. She also sells on Amazon and Etsy. Her products include workbooks, travel cards, activity pages, and therapy pillows. There's a design for every mind, and Erin enjoys working with adults and children to show them the simple effectiveness of mindful tracing. She says it's all about the mindfulness. And without further ado, the American Society of Dowsers is very pleased to introduce Erin Rado.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And hello to everybody. And yes, I am a mindfulness artist, and I've spent the last decade tricking people into meditating using art, which is a very fun thing to do. So I've prepared a presentation, and I thought I would run through it for everybody. So I'm going to share my screen, and forgive me here. Okay, let's get back to the beginning of my presentation. So yes, my Labyrinth line is now called the Labyrinth Connection from the Celtic Art Store, and helping the world calm down one brain at a time. I do Celtic mandalas, finger labyrinths, and then on the bottom corner of this slide, I even took a shot at designing my own original dowsing card, and so it's just such a fun thing to design for dowsing. And yes, as Lidra mentioned, I began my art collection with my Celtic designs. And what you do is you simply trace along the woven pathway of these mandalas, and tracing creates focus. But because they were pathways, it was a very easy step to work from my mandolins to finger labyrinths. And since labyrinths are used so widely with dowsing, it was a natural fit, and the society asked me to come in and do a talk. So I thought I'd start with something simple, because I guess I always assume everyone knows how to use a labyrinth, but not everybody knows how to use a labyrinth. And there's a little trick I've discovered to using a labyrinth. And of course, I create art, so it's all printed, it's flat, it's two-dimensional. But if you've ever walked a labyrinth, of course, you enter in and you walk to the center, you pause, reflect, and walk back out. Tracing with your fingertip is the exact same process, but what's really crucial is when you get to the very center, make sure to do that pause and a deep breath and then you begin to trace back out. So many people just race it right to the middle and they forget to reflect. But when you force yourself to take that nice deep breath and pause, the whole mind settles down and the body right with it. And it's a really neat grounding trick. Also, another great trick is to use your non-dominant hand from time to time. People don't really think about that and don't think they can, but you're just pointing. It's really easy to trace with either hand, which of course works the brain across center cortex. One thing I discovered in my journey with my Celtic designs is that there are 3 different levels of designs. There are simple designs, slightly complex, engaging designs, and very complex, challenging designs. It's not about matching the right design with the right age. It's about matching the right design with the right mindset. I've known precocious 4-year-olds who could trace the Chartres Labyrinth with no problem whatsoever. And likewise, I've dealt with adults who have just been in a car crash and they're dealing with the trauma of that, who don't need anything complex. The Chartres Labyrinth is far too complex for their moment. They need something simple. So just as with my Celtic designs, I've divided my overall Labyrinth collection into simple designs that are very soft and grounding, medium designs that are just a little engaging, just a tiny bit tricky, and very complex designs. And when I say Chartres, yes, I know I'm deliberately mispronouncing that. Amiens, I will also deliberately mispronounce, and Reims, I will also deliberately mispronounce, but it's just easier to visualize it that way in English. So forgive me, yes, I'm saying Chartres. But I would love to share 6 labyrinths from my collection that all have a different feel to them, and they're labyrinths I really, really enjoy. The first one is the Chakravyuha labyrinth, and this is also known as the Hindu labyrinth. So I'm going to pop it up here, and I encourage everybody to point right at your screen and start tracing, if you like. Enter into the labyrinth and just begin to trace along the simple spirals and the simple coils and the bends back and forth until you spiral right to the center. And then you take your nice breath, and I'm going to let everybody work until they get there, and then I'm just going to pause for a minute, and then let's work our way back out the labyrinth, and a simple spiral and a bend and over the top and another bend, and then you're finished. What I love about this labyrinth is this is just like a quick instant reset. It doesn't take very long, and you can go back and forth and back and forth. When you're dowsing and you've got a little too much signal input and everything is just flooding your intuition, this is a really good, quick balance labyrinth. Another labyrinth that is one of my favorites is the St. Lambertus labyrinth. This comes from a church in Germany, and it's actually in the cobblestones of the church. This labyrinth has a 3-dimensionality for me in that it's like stair steps. So I'm going to let everybody again look at the labyrinth, or perhaps I encourage you to point at your screen. And the same thing, enter with your fingertip, enter into the labyrinth on the slight lower left, and then you're sort of going up the steps, up the steps, up the steps, up the steps, and over. And then you sort of slide back down into the next quadrant, and then up and up and up and up and over, and slide back down. And we're doing it with 3rd quadrant, up and up and up and over, and slide back down. And then the last one, up and over and up and slide right into the middle. And you take your breath. And when you're ready to work yourself back out of the labyrinth, the motion is absolutely reversed. You climb up, 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 and over, and then down the steps, down the steps, down the steps, down the steps. And the same thing over into the next quadrant, up, and then down the steps, down the steps, down the steps, down the steps. And then up again for the 3rd quadrant, and then down, 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 down. And one last one, up and over, and whee, down, 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 and out. Kind of reminds me of Lombard Street in San Francisco. It always has. It's just such a fun dynamic with this labyrinth. I always find this one's very engaging with children as well. The Native American labyrinth is another one of my favorites because, again, it has a three-dimensionality to it. The design comes from Tucson, the Taono O'odham Nation, and they weave it into baskets. And sometimes this is also known as the man in the maze because there's a little figure, a little tiny stick figure that appears in the top entrance. And so this one always reminds me of climbing a mesa in the American Southwest. And so I'm going to start tracing, and I encourage everyone to do it with me. Enter in from the top, and then you make a turn and off to the upper left, and then you slide down around the bottom of the mesa until you get to the next plateau. And then you climb up it and up again and around the base until you get to the next plateau. And we're climbing up the mesa and up the mesa again. And where I am right now is I'm on the outside circuit going around the base of the mesa. And then now we have the smaller steps and around the inner ring, and then finishing up with steps and steps and steps until you reach the center. And there's a little outlook, almost looks like a little keyhole right at the top. And I imagine that I'm now on the top of a conical mesa looking out over every issue I'm dealing with, whatever psychic plane I'm on, just observing it from that little plateau in the center, off center of the labyrinth. And then of course, everybody is free to trace their way back out. If you find that your fingertips a little wide, grab a capped pen or anything that points, or use the tip of your fingernail. That's the easiest way to deal with small circuits on a labyrinth. And some of them do get a little small. But I just love the unique experience of the Native American labyrinth because it's really not symmetrical at all. And it really excites different energy levels, I find. So I'm going to move on. This one is my labyrinth, one of my originals. This is the Heart Labyrinth. Hearts are fun because they're bouncy. So if you enter in at the lower portion, enter in, and then the first thing you do is come around the side and then you go bounce, bounce. It's sort of like a bounce house. And then the labyrinth comes round to the bottom, and then you go into the next circuit and up the side and then bounce, bounce. And you'll find that little bouncy motion as you work through the labyrinth and get to the center, where of course you will always pause and reflect. But there's a liveliness to the Heart Labyrinth. And the bounce bounce can also be like the lub dub of your heart. So I'm going to let everybody play with this one just a little bit if you like. And that's the Heart Labyrinth. I've seen other Heart Labyrinths that open on the top, but I prefer to open on the bottom whenever I can because I just think that's a grounding place at the bottom of a labyrinth. So I'm going to advance now. This is another one I really enjoy because it's a little engaging. This is the one, of course, from Ely Cathedral in England. This is based on the Reims Labyrinth from France. The one in Reims doesn't exist any longer, but this one does. It's still in the bell tower of the cathedral. And I'm just going to let everybody play with this labyrinth as you like. I like the fact that it has 4 little reflecting alcoves. So when you enter in and you make your first left-hand angle and then down your right, down to the left corner, you're right in the first little reflecting alcove. And it's sometimes nice to just pause as though you're on a 4 or 5 stage journey. So enjoy this labyrinth and pause in every little alcove and think of a thought or do a grounding mantra and then proceed on however you like to use your labyrinths. But you're going to find this design is naturally engaging. It's not overly complex, but it's not simple either. And actually, when I'm working with children in schools, this is one that the little boys just love. And if those little boys happen to be on the autism spectrum, or if they have attention issues, This is very engaging, but not overly complex. And you may have reached the center right now, that nice square where, of course, you can pause and reflect. I kind of picture also ancient Greece and the labyrinth where the Minotaur was housed with this one. Of course, the ancient Greek one was a trick maze. It's not a single path labyrinth, but I just like this one because it's odd. It's not your typical round shape. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to my last labyrinth. This one is tricky, and I designed it to be that way. Johannes Boeckler, hence the Boeckler Labyrinth, was an architect of shrub labyrinths for gardens of the European rich and famous. And the original Boeckler garden labyrinth was multi-pathway and you could get lost in it, but I've rewoven it. And so this is a unicursal pathway. And when you enter in, it just kind of reminds me sort of a Chinese mosaic, but it has long circuits in the beginning. And as you begin to work through it, toward the end, those circuits get really tight and complex. And there's a different tempo to every single part of this labyrinth. And just when you think you're headed right into a quadrant, no, it goes past the quadrant and then works its way back. This is an incredibly engaging labyrinth, awful lot of fun to play with. And so I'm just going to let everybody enjoy this labyrinth for a little bit because there's no hurrying this one. You really have to watch what you're doing. I like putting the, I'll just yammer for a little bit while everyone's enjoying the labyrinth, and then I'll move on because we're about to finish the talk. I like doing this three-dimensional effect. One of the neatest moments at a show was when a little girl physically reached out and touched one of my cards because she thought it was three-dimensional. And it gives that nice optical illusion, but of course they're flat, they're all printed, but it's very fun. So hopefully you've all reached the center with this one. And you can also download this PDF presentation. Lidra's going to make that available. So you can enjoy these labyrinths on your own, and please tell everybody where you found them. And so for dowsing, I chose 4 labyrinths out of my collection that I thought were really good for dowsing and centering. Of course, the Chakra Vyuha, excellent for a quick little break. Readers, for example, when they're doing psychic readings and they do 3, 4, 5, I've watched them get completely overloaded. When they can just quickly recenter, it really helps the whole intuition and mind signal processing and working with the veil on the other side, just helps it settle down a minute. The Cretan Labyrinth with the blue one here is also known as the Maes Galicia. It was found in Spain. This is the oldest labyrinth that we know of. It's a petroglyph that's carved into a rock, and they found it in Gallic, Spain. But it's called the Cretan Labyrinth because this has appeared on Cretan coins dating into, I think, the 3rd century BC. The one in the lower corner here, the Knidos Labyrinth, was actually found in Turkey, and it dates to the 5th, 6th century AD. It was found with Coptic Christian symbols and different scribal writings that are next to it. But it has long loops, nice long loops, and very peaceful for a slightly longer journey than the Chakra Vyuha, which is meant to be quick. This will take you on that same spiral journey, but it lasts a little longer. And then, of course, the one we all know so well, which is the Chartres Labyrinth, which is our 11th circuit famous labyrinth. For engagement and for really good meditation and centering, you just can't beat the Chartres Labyrinth, and that's probably why it's so very, very famous. So I'm going to move on to my closing slide, and this is where you can find me, CelticArtStore.net, and I publish a beautiful workbook, which is just great to snuggle up in a cozy chair and enjoy. My full collection has 21 designs in it. I publish travel cards that you can just pop right in a backpack or a pack, and when you're on the road and let's say you're dowsing and you're working with people on to douse for them, sometimes it helps to let other people center and settle. So all the signal processing comes through nice and clearly. And you can hand them a little travel card and say, here, trace this for a minute. And then one of the things that I just started getting in with these beautiful, beautiful plush pillowcases, I sell them for therapy pillows because they're big. They're 24 inches square and they're so soft, but they're two-sided. So you'll get 2 labyrinths per pillow. So this is my presentation. I thank you for listening. I am going to kick it back over to Lidra and we're going to open up for questions.
So anybody at this point, we don't have anything in the chat yet. Does anyone have questions? You're welcome to put it in the chat or to just raise your hand if your camera is on, or you can do a reaction. Okay, so we've got to love it. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
We have somebody in the waiting room. We're going to admit them. And they tuned in thinking that you have plenty more that's going on about, so we do have a bit more time. I'm going to see if I can quick go back and download. So if you would like to talk maybe a little bit about the differences between any view on left versus right-handed tracing.
Sure, absolutely. Well, apart from working the different areas of the brain, one of the real keys to working with your other hand is it grounds the mind in a moment. It's a technique I show trauma therapists. I am not a therapist. I do not have an advanced degree. I have my degree in communications. But that said, when I'm at shows and festivals, I will get people coming over to my table that I can see are very stressed or incredibly tense. And when I just can't I can't break through to them, I say, hey, try tracing with your other hand. And they give me that deer in the headlights look for a minute. But in that moment, it's a wonderful signal break. I just got them to stop obsessing about whatever they were obsessing about. And then they begin to use their other hand and they realize they can do it. Then they're actually quite befuddled that they can do that. But in all of this mental processing of just using the non-dominant hand, again, they've stopped obsessing about the traumas or the anxieties that are really getting a hold of them. It's such a wonderful way to free the mind, is to simply work with the other hand. And then, of course, for those of us who are right-handed, your left hand is connected to the right side of the brain, which is your abstract brain. I find that people will get into a little bit better of an intuition headspace when working with a non-dominant hand. And the more you work with a non-dominant hand, the more my opinion, the more I think that people really develop a different connection with their dowsing than they do working with just their dominant hand. So I always encourage the use of both hands.
Wonderful. So next question is, Tim arrived late. Do labyrinths have power? And just before you answer that, Erin, for anybody who's got the chat section open, you'll see that I've uploaded the Dowsing Society talk that Erin put together. So all of the slides are in there. And if you click on that, that should download to your computer and you are welcome to use them. If you'd like any more information, obviously, you'd like to contact her directly and purchase all this wonderful stuff and support her work, but you are welcome to use them for your own pleasure. So the question is, do they have power?
I've never found that any one single object has power unless it can retain energy. Crystals retain energy. What I find with a labyrinth is it inspires different vibrations in us. I've seen many different people react many different ways to the exact same labyrinth because of the way it energizes their particular mind. And that's why I present different designs, again, some of which are calming, some of which are engaging, some of which are very challenging. So I encourage everyone to explore the world of labyrinths and find the ones that trigger you in a really intriguing way. But I don't think the labyrinths have power. I think we have the power, but the labyrinths help us plug into that and help us bring it forth. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great. How, BJ would like to know how you are using it for dowsing.
I don't douse with a labyrinth. I douse with my little pendulum, and everybody, please ignore that call. I'm sorry. That's going to be my internal phone and nothing that I'm going to want to have to deal with. So, forgive me. Why don't you let's just banter a little quick second so that call can go to voicemail. Okay, hold on just one more second. My bad. Okay, that ought to do it. Me personally, when I douse, I use my crystal as a pendulum, and I work with a card, or I work with just my own show me yes, show me no, possibly side to side. I use the labyrinth to calm my mind so I get in the right headspace for dowsing. There are other people who use labyrinths with dowsing. I just don't myself, so I can't really speak to that, but I'm happy to entertain anyone who wants to say, oh, I use labyrinths when dowsing, and I do it this way. So feel free to jump in if anybody wants to make that comment.
Great. Then Jerry would like to know vertical versus horizontal tracing. Do we need clarification, or does that make sense to you?
It doesn't really make sense to me, I'm afraid, because when you're tracing, you follow the pathway. And I didn't really design or see any labyrinths that have vertical versus horizontal lines, because they just go all over the pattern. So forgive me if I don't quite have a frame of reference for your question. I'm so sorry.
Sherry, would you like to elaborate on that? Or, oh, I mean looking straight forward versus down.
Okay. That's, well, now that makes a lot more sense. All right.
Thank you, Jerry.
Me, I find that looking down at happy face, yeah. I find looking down at a labyrinth, especially if it's in my lap or in my palm, is so much more intimate. Interestingly enough, I do make wall stickers that you can slap right on the wall. I do them for classrooms where you can walk right up and start tracing. There, you know, of course, you're using your whole body, you're standing. And I find in that instance, you get energy sort of surrounding all of you, because you've got your whole body engaged because you're standing before a labyrinth and you're tracing the labyrinth. But when I want to be very intimate with my labyrinth, I like to hold a card in my palm, or I hold my workbook, and like I said, in your squishy chair. So that's how I find the difference, is one's more intimate than the other.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments? Got a very nice, intimate crew here.
I love it. This is super cool. I just have to say that. When I was tracing, just on the screen, it was like stuff that was somehow stuck that I hadn't been able to release on my own. When I got to the middle and paused, I got this massive, like, pow, blam, you know, of stuff that had been stuck. So that's why I think it's super cool. So it seems like a really great tool for us to be able to use for our own energy, working on ourselves, but then, you know, we could even use it with clients. If, like, I work with clients, right? So we could, you know, suggest a labyrinth with our own client base. You know, we could send them to your website to get your cool ones, or, you know, find something online, but these are really neat. I've never seen them.
Great.
One of the disciplines that really enjoys my work are play therapists, because one, they're mobile, they go everywhere, and two, they work a lot with children. They love the travel cards because you can just easily say, here, pick a card, any card, and let people choose their own labyrinth. Everyone's attracted to a different pattern. And yes, once you get them tracing, and what were you saying when you got to the center and boom, everything released? That's what the journey out is for, is to process some of that stuff that really just hit you. And then you find, if you haven't quite processed it by the time you get out of the labyrinth, go right back in again. and then let everything percolate both in and out. It's sort of input and release. The flow of a labyrinth is just really neat. Just curious, which design set you free like that?
The first three, and then I had sort of like a weird, somehow the last two that were like the Boeckler one, the square one,
Uh-huh.
and then the one before that, somehow the four-sided stuff was not, it kind of, I don't know, somehow the four-sided stuff, like my energy kind of went, wait a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
But the circular stuff was where it was just like, zzz, and then you get in there, and literally it was like, right? It was,
Right.
wow.
Yeah, those last two are meant to be a little bit more brain teasing, because every so often people are in the mood for that. But when you're centering or just trying to do that breakthrough, those first few, yes, you're gonna have that soft feeling that puts you right where you need to be, and then boom, your mind, I say intuition, but I hope everybody knows what I mean by that. It's that whole connection we have to the universe. I call that intuition. And sometimes we just block it because we live in a very busy, confusing world and we can't get to where we need to go. And so when you can use a tool that helps you release, it's exactly what the labyrinth is for.
Yes, especially now, we've got this whole pandemic-y thing that there's a whole lot of stuff that everybody needs to blast away.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
One of my goals with my collection is to make labyrinths more commonplace. Whenever I'm at a show, oh, that labby thing, my friend went on one of those walks with that labby thing, like a labyrinth. Yeah, that's the word. I want to also mention, if you don't mind a cheap, shameless plug, I've actually got a Zoolily event that'll be happening on September 29th. And so my work will be on Zoolily and my work is on Amazon. The more we can just make people aware that there's a simple art tool that can help them settle their minds down, the more mindfulness we spread around. And it's just such a win-win. And when you can teach a child, especially how to meditate at a young age, you're teaching them a lifelong behavioral management skill. And that's just part of the passion of what I do. I can help people I've never met before. And how exciting is that?
That's wonderful. Great stuff.
Anybody else have a comment or a question?
Yep, go ahead and type it in the chat, everybody, or raise your hand if you'd like to speak up.
Have I used it with autistic kids? Okay, the short answer is yes, but in a limited capacity, because when I work with people, I'm usually at a Renaissance fair or a Celtic festival or an art show. That said, I show to lots of professional therapists, marriage and family therapy, educational therapy, play therapy. I was just at the American School Counselors Conference, and all of those professionals will use my tools with their clinical training with not only autistic, but also attention deficit. And they all have very, very good responses. The idea, especially with autism, when the brain is just overloading and overloading, you know that meltdown is imminent. Get them before they get there, because when they hit meltdown, they're just not going to focus on anything. And I've never been able to redeem a child back from there. But I have a wonderful story of when I was at a show, and this 13-year-old boy-ish, 13, young teen, I could see that he was having trouble focusing, and I showed him how to use a labyrinth. And I said, okay, now today, when you go out to the fair and you start getting a little weird, you get a little overloaded, find a quiet tree, sit down and trace your labyrinth. And they said, okay, and they went on. 5 p.m., the mom comes back and said, you're not going to believe this. I don't know how to thank you. He was going to melt down 3 times today, but each single time he did what you told him to do. He found a quiet place and he just traced until he calmed down. And we were able to enjoy a full day at a busy venue because he had a way to self-regulate. And I mean, when you have something like that coming back at you, you go home feeling really good that night. Anybody else while we still have some time?
Maybe you can address, Erin, how you come up with some of your designs.
Sometimes what I do is for the labyrinths, I will, many of the labyrinths are classical. I've done a whole research into, the Poitier's Labyrinth, or some of my designs, a couple of them like the Boeckler, and then there's another one, started as garden mazes and I just rewove them, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Sometimes when I needed some more simple labyrinths, for example, I have one called the Medieval Labyrinth, I just took a few circuits off the Chartres Labyrinth. Of course, you don't just lop off a few circuits and the labyrinth pathway flows, you have to reweave it. But I did that with Chartres, and I also did that with Amiens. The Amiens is the octagon labyrinth, and in the floor of Amiens, and that's Amiens, Amiens Cathedral in France. Interestingly enough, it's the exact same pattern as Chartres, but Chartres is round and Amiens is an octagon. But I did the same thing, reweaving both of those to make them very simple. I also find that my really, really simple labyrinths are great for pre-K. One of my really good conferences is the Montessori conference. And a lot of those educators are working with pre-K, and they're teaching kids even at that 3-year-old and 4-year-old level to learn to trace with both hands, and when the brain is still forming, the more dual action that you can get going. That's where you do Zentangles and stuff like that. You can do it with a labyrinth as well. It just leads to more synapse connections forming in the brain. So it's always a good idea to work with both hands, but that's another fun way I've been, creating the labyrinths.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. We're getting toward the 40-minute mark. I wasn't sure how much longer we're going to go, but still have time for another question or comment if anybody has any.
Any other burning desires to know?
So Leidra, why don't you take it from here?
Okay, so I've put up, have you, give your website a look and perhaps contact later. Jerry, thank you. What speed?
Oh, by the way, on my website, there's a free download, a Labyrinth download pack. Just search my website for the word download. Have I ever incorporated music with labyrinths? Not with labyrinths. With my Celtic designs, yes, but not with labyrinths, because each labyrinth has a different kind of a tempo. Now, if you want to incorporate a soft, like the bilateral music that'll switch from modulating right to left to right to left, that's a meditation experience to be had. So play your bilateral music and trace your favorite labyrinth. Again, everybody will have their favorite. Chances are you'll be in an incredibly different transcendental state by the time you've passed 10 or 15 minutes using the bilateral music and your labyrinth. It's can never guarantee where you end up, but boy, oh boy, where your brain be quite open and quite receptive. That almost always happens.
And Tim would like to know, what speed do you go? Does it matter if you trace it quickly or slowly?
Easy and evenly, easily and evenly. Especially when, for example, like working with kids, they think it's a puzzle maze, like they're used to Denny's, and they go zoom, done. And you say, no, pause, take the breath. Once you take the breath, I promise everything will go into an easy rhythm. You don't even have to try it. If you're fighting with yourself too hard, oh my God, am I going too fast, too slow? Trust me, you're overthinking it. Get to the center and take the breath. Everything calms down right after that. Your brain just goes right into a different state. Because what we're really doing is working from the prefrontal cortex, the analytical part of the brain, to the medial prefrontal cortex. I've had several neuroscientists I've met at Renaissance fairs assure me that's exactly what's happening when you work with the mindful tracing, whether it's my Celtic collection or the Labyrinth. Easily and evenly. It's about the journey. It's not about finishing a goal. The goal is to allow yourself to open up and become mindful. Anything else?
Okay, beautiful, beautiful.
And it's just so neat that you can use a tool. People think they can never meditate because it takes forever. and they never want to do yoga because they just don't have the time commitment. Everybody has 2 minutes. Oh, there's a
Oh, there we go. Joanne's got one right now.
got her church's labyrinth. Absolutely. Oh, and by the way, I deliberately leave my work 2-dimensional. I suppose I should have mentioned this from the beginning. You have to focus on it more when it's 2-dimensional. When it's 3-dimensional, your finger will guide you. You don't have to watch what you're doing. But when it's flat, you do have to watch what you're doing. And you have to watch carefully. Because when you think, ha, I got this, you're like, oh, I lost it. Bang. That's that moment that the brain switches, is when the brain realizes, I have to focus here, don't I?
So I've put up the talk again so people can find it easily in the chat. If you'd like to download that, you can download that to your computer so you can play with them as much as you'd like and find your favorite labyrinth. See which one.
It's okay if you print them out and laminate them and show them around. Again, I also have the Labyrinth download that's on my website. Just please tell everybody where you got it, because this is honestly how I make my living. I have no other job than this, and COVID has just made things a little tricky without any live shows to work with or conferences. But that certainly hasn't stopped me. I'm really excited about Zulily. And I just had some meetings with some big retailers like Office Depot and Staples. And it would just be so neat to get these in Barnes and Noble and everywhere, because then everyone can just go, hey, look, I'm going to take these home and learn how to meditate.
And we're certainly hoping, Erin, that you'll join us for our ASD convention next year. I'm sure people
yes,
would
I'm
love
selling
to
the
meet you in
pillows.
person.
Yep, Joanne. Yes, I'm selling the pillows. I have pillows that come pre-stuffed, and those are on a soft polyester. They're not fluffy, but they're really, really nice. Then I also have the double-sided pillow cases, and those are plush. And oh my gosh, you just touch them. They're so inviting to the touch, and they're big. They're 24 inches square. And if you want to overstuff them, you can put a 26-inch insert into the sham. And when you start touching these, because they're so big, you find your whole hand relaxes right onto the pillow. And you just like a cat pawing, just like making kitty biscuits on your Labyrinth pillow. It's a wonderful way to incorporate soothing tactile with the whole visual integration of a labyrinth. And I found a really good printer to do those. I have everything, I designed it, I have it printed for me, but being an artist, I'm very picky about the output. So I always make sure it's to my specifications. And by the way, just for fun, I also do Labyrinth face masks, which I have printed for me, because I figure, hey, as long as we've got to wear them, we may as well look good. So that takes us to the 45-minute mark. So Leidra, go ahead and take it from here.
Sounds good. Okay. So again, I'm going to repeat that Erin's Celtic Mandolin and Finger Labyrinth Mindful Tracing art collections are available on her website, which is celticartstore.net. She also sells on Amazon and Etsy. Products include the workbooks, the travel cards, the activity pages, and the Wuzzy Puppy therapy pillows that are soft and relax your hand.
And I'm going to write a quick chat here. Zulily on September 29th. That's when my event. Because Zulily will give you a little bit of a discount off regular retail. Because that's what they do. They're Zulily. Okay. And I've already made those arrangements. And yes, the pillows are great for children. That's why play therapists absolutely love therapy pillows. But don't discount the fact that when you are stressed, holding a wonderfully plush pillow next to your chest is great. Zulily.com. It's a discount marketplace. It's huge. Zulily.com.
Okay. So thank you so much, Erin. We appreciate, on the behalf of the American Society of Dowsers, we greatly appreciate
so much for having
all of this. Fantastic. I'm going to open the mic so everybody can wish you well and say good night or good day, depending on where you all are.
Good night.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Very,
you
very
again.
interesting. We will check out the website. Thank you. And Zulily.
Please do.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you, Lidra.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you so very, very much. I appreciate you having me.